is a nice title.
Yeah, in England, Laura's called the head of the School of Architecture at Canterbury. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a head of school.
Head of School of Architecture.
And what's good is everyone who starts a bar, it's not by words, but by image or by a thing. But he's a painter, so he has to set himself on the other side of the wall. So he will be painting. So you can see him in the next break that he has to set himself on the wall. He has been accessory for some 10, 12 years. And then now he is tutor on DAB and on diploma. And we have given him a kind of continuous job because we cannot lose. Now we've got a new friend, we will have next week.
Thanks very much, and thank you for coming to listen to and to borrow. I'm going to try to relate some of my own work as a painter, to some of the themes that people have been talking about today. I've only got kind of 15, 20 minutes, and I've got about 30 years of work here. So I'm showing you a really small selection of aspects of my own work. When I first came to Bath, I was fascinated by your concept of the other world. And it's probably taken me 12 years to understand what you guys meant by the other world as part of your curriculum. But what I've called this is space and place in one other world, because all I'm showing you now is my other world, if you like, yeah? The creative work that I've done. And I was just saying to my colleague Oren, that's very different to the kind of work that you've been seeing so far today, which is so much about the macro scale and how an architect has a kind of responsibility for society. As an individual artist, I have a kind of different context to work within. So this is very much going from that kind of macro scale right down to the very personal. Yeah? But I hope that from that kind of personal experience, it will give you some pointers about threads of common interest. I don't know how space and place translate in Norwegian. It's two very distinctive words or not. But if you think of space as a three-dimensional world in which things happen, yeah? And perhaps place as the value that we put into that space. Yeah? Another way of looking at this, whether you're an artist or an architect or a planner, is think of space as an opportunity, not a problem. And think of place as your personal kind of position within that opportunity. And I think in that sense, as an artist or as an architect, we probably share the same territory. So, okay, I said that about 30 years of work here. That's painting I made 30 years ago when I was first an art student. And it's called My Studio Space. What was interesting is that actually it wasn't my space at all, but it was a view of a large empty studio, and I would have been standing just here. It's a very direct painting. But it's a painting that 30 years later still fascinates me. And you'll see I've got a kind of another version of it that I've just recently done in the last 2 years. That's a drawing of some objects in a kitchen, a domestic space, and again, my place, my house, the domestic. Insignificant objects, but something that you can still explore. You can still explore the different viewpoints, the subtleties, the contrast, the light and the shade. And obviously, there's a kind of interest there in cubism and the whole idea of analysing a space or a place from different viewpoints. Now I'm going to move fairly quickly through the images because there are about 20 and we haven't got very long. Landscape has also been something that fascinates me. We call it landscape, but you could call it land space, or land place, or our place within the land. And I made a series of works that were all about the impact of industrial structures in the landscape. And these were, at the time when there were lots of electrical installations being constructed in the Welsh valleys in the west of England. So these were, if you like, my reactions to some of those issues of how we interfere with the landscape, or how we inhabit a landscape through our structures. But there's a tension in these, because although there's an objection in the work perhaps to the way that we treat the landscape, there's also an excitement in it. There's a visual excitement, a dynamic, which an artist can also respond to. And again, these were drawings made at the same time, and made by walking around the landscape and taking small components and then reconstructing them into a new structure. And then I made a series of works which were larger scale. That's probably about actual scale, that drawing. And these were made by gathering lots of different drawings and then physically tearing them to pieces and then recollaging them, reconstituting them, and trying to find larger, simple shapes and forms within the landscape. And some of these became quite monumental in a sense. And in fact, this is quite an ambiguous drawing, because it was actually originally a brush drawing of a landscape that was then really a very empty landscape that has then been torn up and reconstituted and a kind of object made of it. So it's kind of translation of that open space into an object of that way. And again, that's probably just slightly above life size. Okay, these led to some more detailed work looking at structures, and particularly mausoleums and monuments, and the nature of the monumental in the British landscape. And I made a series of works that were all about particular monuments and mausoleums out in the wilder parts of northern England. So the works you've seen mostly so far have been black and white, earlier painting. But at the same time I was making very large paintings. This painting is probably 3 metres by 2 metres. It's a big oil painting, very thin stains of paint. But this was really about the kind of contrast that you can find in a space. The coolness of a space, the quietness of a space, or the liveliness or the intensity of light in a particular space. And I made a series of works which literally presented these two depictions of space and place. And then we've heard lots of discussion this morning about, I suppose, kind of the recolonisation of ignored spaces. At the moment in the UK there's a concept called edgeland, which is this land that has been kind of ignored and left, the bit behind the supermarket or the bit by the side of the motorway. And they've actually become kind of natural nature reserves now within the urban environment. And I had a kind of fascination with that too, just from a visual point of view, exploring these strange empty places that had a new kind of life forming within them. So these paintings are full of metaphor as well, and I'm not really going to talk about all that content today, because I'm trying to concentrate on the sense of place and space in my work. And part of that process of gathering information, my working process as an artist, was to make what I suppose I would call topographical sketches or watercolours, drawings of actual places, but made very quickly to try and capture, if you like, the dynamism of a space or an environment. And again, these are these kind of neglected parts of the British coastline. They're not picturesque in the sense of picturesque within the world of painting at all. They're more about just the rawness of a particular space. And again here, a very different kind of, quite large painting again, 1.5 metres by 2 metres probably. Paintings of edgelands within South London, where I lived at the time making these paintings. Exaggerated and reconstituted from many different drawings made on site. And then I was applying the same kind of strategy to painting, not only in an urban context, but in a very rural context as well, within a strong tradition of British painting of the landscape, of the farmland of Britain. And so I made some paintings that were about where you find a single object lying around in a field or something, and trying to set those in these paintings with very deep perspective. But this was really all about the kind of drama of a space and the poetry of it, if you like. And then I'm going to round up with some slides of more recent work, which again has kind of become a little bit less structured in some ways. You'll see what I mean in a minute. This is a large ink drawing I made recently of trees, but it's done by working on small sections of the drawing out in nature and drawing one component and then walking around and drawing another and then another and adding them all together. So it's actually a big collage of different brush drawings, but all done very spontaneously and all done outside in front of this environment. That's the painting that's on the wall next door. And again, this was a painting that was really about flatness, actually, because one of the things that a painter can enjoy is the tension between trying to create a sense of space, an illusion of space, but you're always being drawn back to the flatness of the painting surface and all of the relationships that exist within that thing we call the picture plane. Many architects don't deal with that in the same way. But the picture plane is actually a subject that many artists deal with purely as their main theme. So that's a painting which is really quite a new painting for me, and in some ways is a very conventional looking painting, in that it's a straightforward landscape painting, but actually I think for me it's also challenging some of the ways that I have been tackling space in my work. And then here's the version of that studio painting that I've made in the past year, and this is my current painting of my current studio where I now live. But again, done in a very different way. This is made of collaged pieces of board, painted board. So colours taken from my immediate environment, painted onto board, cut into shapes, and then reassembled and played around with, I suppose. Next. And again, this is my corner in my studio. And this, somebody was talking about thinking space, the need for places to reflect and think. And in many ways, the studio is that kind of space. It's somewhere where you sit for hours and reflect on things. And this painting is actually called "The Pale Moon Breaks My Heart," which, in terms of looking at it spatially, you would have no idea that that was the title, but that's the title of this painting. because it's really all about the things that you think about when you're in a space like this and not what you actually put on the canvas. Next. And then, again, very domestic drawing made very recently of my cocktail cabinet. Very important part of life, but for most of us, but an often neglected thing, that even if you're an artist who's doing very rigorously with a kind of research agenda perhaps, of a particular genre or a particular subject that you're trying to examine, I also have to step out of my other world into another world, and that is often the domestic world and the things that are just in front of you, which include things like cats and cocktail cabinets. Next. And then this is a drawing, perhaps the most recent work I've made, literally in the last month. And this is about the death of my mother, in fact, 2 years ago. And what this explores is that as an artist or as an architect, you also have to explore a kind of emotional space, which is also relates to the physical world. So I suppose in this final work, what I'm trying to show you is that connection between the importance of space in your life, but also your sense of place within that, and how you can explore the tension and the dynamic of that in your own work, whether you're a painter, as I am, or whether you're an architect. Okay, that's all. If I could just say that Professor Oren Lieberman joined our college, is it 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah. And Oren has got a very new team of architecture staff at the college, and his School of Architecture is right alongside our School of Fine Art. They're both on the same campus, and that is now a pretty unusual situation in the UK, and a very exciting one. So it means that you've got two fields of exploration and discovery side by side. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks. Yes, also thank you for inviting me to speak today, and Lawrence, thank you, because I've never seen your work before, and it's quite enlightening, actually. I think I'm going to be the first to use this today. I've been eyeing this all morning. Some of the things I'd like to talk about today relate, but perhaps in different terms, to some of the things that we've heard about already. And it's probably a kind of talk about pedagogy. What I'd like to do is, I've collected quite quickly in the last days some examples from some of the staff and from the students to show you kind of some of the things we're interested in at the school. And what that might mean in terms of the city as well. I think that it probably all boils down to this probably overused phrase now, spatial practices. I still like it. As a matter of fact, we recently established a master's called Spatial Practices, Art, Architecture, and